Staff Sergeant Riley Clark checked her M4 carbine one last time before stepping into the kill zone. 30 rounds, one magazine, no backup, no support, no extraction plan if things went sideways. The Afghan valley stretched before her like an open grave. Steep walls on both sides, a narrow dirt road cutting through the middle, and somewhere in those shadows, the Taliban fighters who'd been terrorizing villages for months. Intelligence said there were 15 to 20 hostiles in the area. Manageable odds for a Delta Force operator with proper support. But Riley didn't have proper support. She had 30 rounds and a mission that couldn't wait. "Reaper 1, you are not cleared for solo approach," the voice crackled in her earpiece. "Command, 300 kilometers away in their comfortable operations center, watching her helmet cam feed and probably having a collective heart attack. Wait for backup. ETA 45 minutes. Riley kept walking. 45 minutes meant 3 more villages burned, a dozen more civilians executed, and the high-value target she'd been tracking for 6 months disappearing into Pakistan where they'd never find him again. "Reaper 1, acknowledge." She reached up and switched off her radio. Not protocol, definitely not approved. Probably career-ending if she survived long enough to face the consequences. The M4 felt solid in her hands, 7 pounds of polymer and steel that had been her constant companion through 4 deployments. She'd fired this exact weapon on 3 continents, put thousands of rounds through it, knew its quirks and capabilities better than most people knew their own spouses. But 30 rounds wasn't much when you were walking into a valley that intelligence said held at least 15 hostiles. And intelligence had a nasty habit of being wrong. The dirt road crunched under her boots. Morning sun was burning off the mountain mist, revealing terrain that had swallowed armies for centuries. The British had died here. The Soviets had died here. And now Americans were learning the same hard lessons about fighting in mountains where every rock could hide an enemy and every shadow could conceal death. Riley's tactical vest felt light without the usual loadout. No backup magazines because there hadn't been time to resupply. No grenades because she'd used her last 2 yesterday. No radio support because she'd just turned it off. Just her M4, 30 rounds, a sidearm with 15 more, and the training that had gotten her through Delta Force selection when 90% of candidates failed. She was maybe 200 meters into the valley when she saw the first sign she'd made a terrible mistake. Footprints, fresh, dozens of them, way more than 15 or 20 fighters. Riley stopped, her tactical mind processing the information at lightning speed. The prints were recent, within the last hour based on how the morning dew had disturbed them, multiple sizes suggesting different individuals. Boot prints mixed with sandal prints, indicating both trained fighters and local recruits. And the sheer number of tracks suggested. The first shot cracked past her head before she could finish the thought. Riley dove behind a boulder as automatic weapons fire erupted from both sides of the valley. Not 15 fighters, not 20. The muzzle flashes came from at least 30 different positions, probably more, and they'd been waiting for her. It was a trap, a perfect, professionally executed ambush, and she'd walked right into it with 1 magazine. She pressed against the boulder as rounds sparked off the stone, her mind racing through her options. Fall back. But the trail behind her was now cut off by fighters who'd emerged from concealment. Push forward, straight into the heaviest concentration of the enemy fire. Go left or right, up the steep valley walls where she'd be exposed and easy to pick off. There were no good options, just degrees of bad. And then it got worse. From behind a rock formation 50 meters ahead, fighters began emerging, not Taliban in traditional clothing. These were wearing tactical gear, plate carriers, helmets, professional kit. And they moved with the coordinated precision of trained soldiers. Riley counted them as they spread out in a textbook encirclement formation. 30, 35, 40. 40 armed soldiers, professional fighters with military training, all converging on her position. And she had 30 rounds. The math was brutally simple. Even if every shot was perfect, and nobody was perfect in combat, she'd run dry with at least 10 fighters still operational. And that was assuming they didn't have reinforcements, which they probably did. She'd walked into enemy territory with one magazine, and now 40 armed soldiers were surrounding her. This was exactly the kind of scenario Delta Force instructors used as an example of what not to do, the kind of tactical disaster that got operators killed and became cautionary tales. But Riley hadn't gotten into Delta Force by accepting defeat. She'd gotten in by finding solutions when everyone else saw only problems. She had 30 rounds, 40 enemies, 0 backup. Time to show them what Delta Force training really meant. 72 hours earlier, Riley had been sitting in a briefing room at Bagram Airfield, listening to intelligence officers describe a target they'd been chasing for half a year. Kareem Shah, also known as the engineer, the briefer said, pulling up a photo of a thin man with a neatly trimmed beard and calculating eyes. Former Afghan army officer, trained by U.S. forces, turned Taliban commander after we pulled support from his unit in 2014. He's responsible for coordinating attacks across 3 provinces and has demonstrated tactical sophistication well beyond typical Taliban operations. Major Tom Hendricks, Riley's team leader, leaned forward. At 45, Hendricks was old for Delta Force operations, but he'd earned his position through 2 decades of successful missions and a reputation for bringing his people home alive. What makes him Delta Force priority instead of conventional targeting? 3 reasons, the briefer replied. First, he's planning a major coordinated attack on multiple forward operating bases. We've intercepted partial communications, suggesting simultaneous assaults within the next week. Second, he's holding 2 American civilian contractors kidnapped from a road construction project. Third, his tactical knowledge and command structure make him nearly impossible for conventional forces to locate and neutralize. Riley studied the imagery on screen. The target area was a valley system in Kunar province, near the Pakistan border. Rough terrain, limited approach routes, perfect defensive positions, the kind of place where small forces could hold off much larger ones if they knew what they were doing. And if this Kareem Shah had U.S. military training, he definitely knew what he was doing. "What's the security situation?" asked Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb, the team's weapons specialist and Riley's closest friend in the unit. Estimated 15 to 20 fighters under his direct command, with access to larger forces if needed. They're well armed. AK pattern rifles, PKM machine guns, RPGs, possibly some of the weapons we left behind during the withdrawal. Riley raised her hand. "What's the civilian situation in the area?" The briefer pulled up more imagery. 3 villages within 5 kilometers of his suspected position. Population maybe 500 total. He's been using them for supplies and concealment, but also executing anyone suspected of cooperating with coalition forces. We've had 7 confirmed civilian casualties in the past month. "So time-sensitive target," Riley observed. "The longer he operates, the more civilians die." "Correct, which is why we're launching this operation in 48 hours. But 48 hours became 36 when intelligence intercepted communications suggesting Shah was planning to execute the American hostages. Then, it became 24 hours when a local informant reported Shah was preparing to move to a new location. And then, it became immediate when Riley, on a solo reconnaissance patrol, spotted Shah's distinctive vehicle convoy moving through a valley only 15 kilometers from her position. She'd called it in immediately. "Command Reaper 1, I have eyes on target package, 3 vehicles moving south through Valley 7. Request immediate support for interdiction." "Reaper 1, stand by. Closest QRF is 45 minutes out. Maintain observation only. Do not engage." But Riley knew what 45 minutes meant. By then, the convoy would be gone, Shah would disappear, and they'd spend another 6 months trying to find him while he planned attacks and executed civilians. She'd made a decision, not the approved decision, not the safe decision, but the decision that gave the mission a chance of success. She'd started moving toward the valley. Now, pressed behind a boulder with 40 armed fighters closing in and only 30 rounds in her magazine, Riley had to wonder if that decision was about to get her killed. Fire was coming from 3 sides now, concentrated and disciplined. These weren't farmers with rifles. These were trained soldiers executing a coordinated ambush. They were bounding forward in teams, suppressing her position while others moved, using proper fire and movement tactics. Riley's tactical mind analyzed the situation with cold precision. Assets: M4, carbine with 30 rounds, sidearm with 15 rounds, 2 smoke grenades, 1 fragmentation grenade, training and experience, knowledge of terrain from reconnaissance liabilities, outnumbered 40-1, surrounded on 3 sides, no backup for 45 minutes minimum, limited ammunition, enemy has high ground and defensive positions, radio off, own fault. The math was bad. But bad math just meant you had to be smarter, not stronger. Riley pulled out her fragmentation grenade. 1 grenade wouldn't kill 40 fighters, but it could create an opportunity. She needed to break the encirclement, find better defensive position, and make every round count until backup arrived. If backup arrived, she cooked the grenade for 2 seconds, long enough that they couldn't throw it back, then hurled it toward the densest concentration of fighters on her right flank. The explosion was immediate and devastating. The blast wave hit her even behind cover, and she saw at least 3 fighters go down. Before the dust settled, Riley was moving. She sprinted left toward the valley wall, firing controlled bursts from her M4, 3-round bursts, aimed shots, Delta Force training overriding the adrenaline that wanted her to mag dump. She dropped 2 fighters who tried to intercept her path. That left 25 rounds. A PKM machine gun opened up from a position she hadn't seen, rounds chewing up the ground around her feet. Riley dove behind a cluster of rocks, her breath coming hard. The machine gun had her pinned, and fighters were already moving to flank her new position. She popped up long enough to acquire the machine gun position, 40 meters, elevated position behind sandbags, 2 fighters manning it. She dropped back as return fire sparked off the rocks, 40 meters, partially concealed target, 1 gunner, 1 assistant feeding ammunition. She had maybe 5 seconds before the flanking teams reached positions where they could shoot her from multiple angles. Riley rose smoothly, M4 to shoulder, letting muscle memory and thousands of hours of training guide her aim. The gunner's head was partially visible above the sandbags. Partially was enough. Single shot. The gunner dropped. The assistant gunner was already moving to take over the weapon. Another single shot. He fell. 2 rounds. 2 threats eliminated. 23 rounds remaining. But the flanking teams were closer now, moving through dead ground where she couldn't see them. Riley pulled one of her smoke grenades, popped it, and threw it into the open area between her position and the advancing fighters. Thick gray smoke billowed up, obscuring their view and, more importantly, obscuring her movement. She used the concealment to sprint deeper into the rocky terrain of the valley wall, climbing toward higher ground. Her legs burned from the exertion at altitude, but she pushed through. Higher ground meant better defensive position, better fields of fire, better chance of survival. Behind her, she could hear commands being shouted in Pashto. They were organizing, adapting to her tactics, probably bringing up more fighters. This wasn't going to end with her killing all 40 of them. That was fantasy. This was going to end with her holding position long enough for backup to arrive, or running out of ammunition first. She found a defensible position, a cluster of large boulders that provided cover from multiple angles with a clear view of the approaches. Not perfect, but better than being in the open. Riley checked her M4, 23 rounds. She had to make them count. The first fighter who came up the slope moved too confidently, assuming the smoke had completely concealed his approach. Riley waited until he was 20 meters away, close enough that she couldn't miss, far enough that he couldn't rush her position before she could react. One shot, center mass. He went down. 22 rounds. His teammates tried to suppress her position with automatic fire, but they were shooting blind, not knowing her exact location among the boulders. Riley waited patiently, watching for targets. Two fighters tried to bound forward using mutual support. She dropped the first one mid-sprint, 21 rounds. His partner dove for cover, but Riley had tracked his movement. When he rose to return fire, she was ready. 20 rounds. "She's up in the rocks," someone shouted in heavily accented English. "Flank left and right." They were trying to surround her again. Riley shifted position within her boulder cluster, moving to where she could cover the left flank approach. She caught 3 fighters moving together. Bad tactic, good target. She fired carefully aimed shots. 3 rounds, 3 targets. The lead fighter dropped immediately. The second took a round to the shoulder and went down. The third tried to retreat and caught a round that sent him tumbling down the slope. 17 rounds remaining. But the right flank was exposed now. Riley spun to cover it just as 2 fighters appeared, weapons up. She was a half-second slow. They saw her the same moment she saw them. Both sides fired simultaneously. Riley felt the impacts hit her plate carrier. 2 rounds, center mass like being kicked by a mule. The ceramic plates held, stopping the rounds, but the kinetic energy knocked her backward. She hit the ground hard, breath exploding from her lungs, but her M4 hadn't stopped firing. Even falling, even winded, muscle memory kept the weapon on target. Both fighters went down. 15 rounds. Riley gasped for air, her chest screaming from the plate impacts. She'd have massive bruises later. If there was a later, she rolled to better cover, her tactical mind counting enemies. She'd dropped at least 12 fighters definitively, wounded maybe 5 more. That left 23 to 28 still operational, depending on how many wounded were still combat effective. And she had 15 rounds. The math was getting worse. Then she heard something that made her blood run cold, the distinctive sound of a vehicle engine. They were bringing up reinforcements or heavy weapons. Either option was bad. Riley looked down the valley and saw it, a technical truck mounting a DSHK heavy machine gun. The 12.7 millimeter weapon could punch through her cover and turn her defensible position into a death trap. She had to neutralize that gun. The technical was maybe 60 meters away, moving slowly up the rocky trail. The gunner behind the DSHK was scanning for targets. Riley had seconds before he spotted her position and turned that devastating weapon on her location. 60 meters, moving target. Heavy weapon that would kill her if she missed. Riley steadied her breathing, letting her heart rate slow. Delta Force had taught her to find calm in chaos, to make impossible shots look routine. She'd qualified expert with every weapon in the U.S. arsenal, had put rounds through targets at ranges that seemed impossible. But this wasn't a qualification range. This was life or death, and she had 15 rounds left. She aimed for the gunner. 60 meters, slight upward angle, target partially concealed by the gun shield. She'd have to thread the needle between the shield's edge and the gunner's body. Riley took up the trigger slack, let out half a breath, and squeezed. The gunner jerked and slumped over the weapon. The technical swerved as the driver reacted, giving her a clear shot at the cab. 3 more rounds through the windshield. The vehicle lurched to a stop, engine still running, but no one moving inside. 11 rounds remaining. But the technical's dramatic stop had an unexpected effect. The remaining fighters hesitated, realizing that charging up the slope toward someone who could make those shots was a fast way to die. Riley used the moment to key her radio back on. She turned it off to avoid the distraction of command telling her to retreat. Now she needed them to know where she was. Command Reaper 1. I am engaged with approximately 25 to 30 hostiles in Valley 7. Request immediate air support and QREF. I am low on ammunition and cannot sustain defensive position much longer. Reaper 1, confirm your location. We show you. The transmission cut off as rounds sparked off the rocks near her position. The fighters had gotten over their hesitation and were advancing again. Riley dropped 2 more with carefully aimed shots, 9 rounds. Reaper 1, air support is 12 minutes out. Ground QRF is 30 minutes. Can you hold? 30 minutes, with 9 rounds and at least 20 fighters still operational. Negative on 30 minutes, Riley said, dropping another fighter who got too brave. 8 rounds. I need support now or extraction plan. There is no extraction plan for your position. Air support is fastest option. You need to hold. 8 rounds, 20 fighters, 12 minutes. Riley did the math. If she maintained her current fire discipline, 1 round per threat, only engaging targets who posed immediate danger, she might make it work. Might, but combat didn't work on might. Combat worked on Murphy's Law. Anything that could go wrong would go wrong, and things were about to go very wrong. She heard the distinctive whoosh of an RPG being fired. The rocket-propelled grenade hit the rocks 10 feet from her position, the blast wave picking her up and throwing her like a doll. She hit the ground in a tumble, ears ringing, vision blurred, the M4 torn from her hands. Riley lay there for a second, stunned, her brain trying to reset. She could feel blood running down her face from shrapnel cuts. Her left arm wasn't responding right, probably dislocated from the blast, and she couldn't see her rifle. Voices were shouting, getting closer. They knew she was wounded, and they were moving in for the kill. Riley forced herself to move. Her M4 was gone, probably thrown 20 feet by the blast, but she still had her sidearm. She drew the Glock 19 with her good hand, rolled to a sitting position behind cover, and waited. The first fighter who came around the boulder was too confident, weapon lowered, probably thinking she was dead or incapacitated. Riley put 2 rounds center mass. He dropped. 13 rounds left in the Glock. 2 more fighters tried to rush her position together. She fired as fast as she could pull the trigger, controlled pairs, Delta Force training overriding the pain and disorientation. Both went down. 9 rounds. But her position was compromised. She was wounded, and she'd lost her primary weapon. Riley tried to move to better cover, but her left arm wasn't working properly. Dislocated or broken didn't matter. It was combat ineffective. She pressed her back against a boulder, Glock up, waiting for the next rush. They'd be more cautious now, would probably try to suppress her position and flank systematically, and they had all the time in the world. She had 9 rounds in 12 minutes. Then she heard the most beautiful sound she'd ever experienced. Jet engines. Reaper 1, Warhawk 3-2 on station. We have your position marked. Designate targets. F-16S. Fast movers with precision-guided weapons. The cavalry had arrived early. Riley keyed her radio with her good hand. Warhawk 3-2. Targets are concentrated in Valley 7, approximately 20 to 25 hostiles in rocks and scattered defensive positions. Danger close to my position. I'm on the western valley wall among large boulder formations. Copy danger close. We're going to make a show of force pass first. See if they break. Stay in position. The F-16 came in low and fast, the roar of its engines echoing through the valley like the voice of an angry god. The effect on the fighters was immediate. They broke from their positions, running for better cover or trying to flee entirely. But Riley wasn't done yet. She'd found her M4 during the jet's pass, and while her left arm was useless, she could still shoot one-handed if the targets were close enough, and the fighters running from the airstrike were giving her perfect targets. Riley propped the M4 on a rock, using it as a rest to stabilize her aim with one arm. She dropped 3 fighters who were running across open ground. 5 rounds remaining. Reaper 1, we have clear targeting solution on enemy concentration in the northern section. Confirm no friendlies in that area. Riley looked at the terrain. The northern section was where most of the surviving fighters had retreated, far enough from her position that the blast wouldn't affect her. Confirmed, Warhawk. Northern section is hostile only. You are cleared hot. The F-16 came around again, and this time it wasn't just for show. The GBU-12 laser-guided bomb hit the Northern Valley wall with devastating precision. The explosion was massive, triggering a rock slide that buried half the enemy positions. When the dust cleared, the valley was quiet except for the ringing in Riley's ears. Reaper 1, ground QRF is 15 minutes out. What's your status? Riley looked at herself. Shrapnel wounds, left arm dislocated, probably a concussion, definitely bruised ribs from the plate carrier impacts, covered in blood and dust, but alive. I'm operational, she said, which was technically true if you defined operational loosely enough. I need medical when QRF arrives. Copy. Warhawk 3-2 is staying on station for air cover until ground support reaches you. Riley slumped against the boulder, finally letting herself feel the pain and exhaustion. She'd walked into enemy territory with 30 rounds, gotten surrounded by 40 armed fighters, lost most of her ammunition in an extended firefight, got blown up by an RPG, and somehow survived long enough for air support to arrive. The tactical instructors at Delta Force would either use this as an example of what not to do or what to do when everything went wrong. She wasn't sure which, but then she remembered why she'd done this. She keyed her radio. Command, Reaper 1. Did we get the primary target? There was a pause. Reaper 1, drone has been monitoring the valley. Karim Shah's vehicle was destroyed in the airstrike. We're awaiting ground confirmation, but thermal imaging shows no movement. Riley smiled despite the pain. 30 rounds, 40 fighters, one very bad day. But mission accomplished. The QRF found her 15 minutes later, right where she said she'd be, sitting among a boulder field that looked like a battlefield museum. The ground was littered with spent brass casings from her M4, and the surrounding rocks were scarred by impacts from the firefight. The medic took one look at her and immediately called for medevac. Ma'am, you've got multiple shrapnel wounds. Your left arm is definitely dislocated, possible concussion, and I'm pretty sure at least 2 of your ribs are cracked. You should not be conscious right now. Good thing I didn't get the memo, Riley replied, letting them strap her to a stretcher. Major Hendricks arrived with the QRF and stood over her stretcher with an expression that mixed relief and fury. You turned off your radio. Yes, sir. You ignored orders to wait for backup. Yes, sir. You conducted a solo assault on a fortified position with inadequate ammunition and no support. It seemed like the right call at the time, sir. Hendricks looked at the battlefield, counting the visible enemy casualties. How many rounds did you fire? 30 from my primary weapon, 6 from my sidearm. 36 rounds total. Body count is at least 15 confirmed kills, with additional enemy KIA from the airstrike you called in. Karim Shah is confirmed dead. We found his body in the wreckage. The 2 American hostages were recovered from a compound 2 kilometers from here. They're alive. Riley felt relief wash over her. The hostages were safe. That made everything worth it. You're going to be court-martialed for this, Hendricks said. Disobeying direct orders, turning off your radio, conducting unauthorized offensive operations. The brass is going to have your head. Yes, sir. I understand. But you're also probably going to get a medal. Silver Star at minimum, possibly more. You single-handedly eliminated a high-value target and saved 2 American lives. Just doing my job, sir. Your job is to follow orders, Sergeant. He gestured at the battlefield. This is either the most brilliant piece of tactical improvisation I've ever seen or the most reckless stupidity. I honestly can't decide which. Maybe it's both, sir. The helicopter arrived to take Riley to the field hospital. As they loaded her stretcher, she looked back at the valley one more time. Valley 7, where she'd walked in with 1 magazine and faced down 40 armed fighters. She'd gone into that valley expecting to die. Instead, she'd survived, completed the mission, and proven something she'd always believed. The weapon didn't matter as much as the warrior carrying it. 30 rounds hadn't been enough ammunition for the fight, but it had been exactly what she'd needed to hold until help arrived. Sometimes that's all you could ask for. 3 months later, Riley stood at attention in the briefing room at Fort Bragg, her left arm fully healed, the shrapnel scars barely visible, facing a review board that would decide her fate. The board consisted of 3 full colonels and a brigadier general, all with enough combat experience to understand what she'd done and why. But understanding didn't mean approving. "Staff Sergeant Clark," the general began, "you disobeyed direct orders from command. You turned off your communications equipment to avoid further orders. You conducted offensive operations without authorization. Any one of those is grounds for court-martial. All 3 together is grounds for dismissal from Delta Force." "Yes, sir. I understand. However," the general continued, "you also eliminated a high-value target who was directly responsible for multiple American casualties. You saved 2 American hostages who would likely have been executed, and you held off a numerically superior force long enough for air support to arrive, despite being wounded and nearly out of ammunition." The general stood and walked around the table. "Your tactical instructors have reviewed the helmet camera footage from your operation. They calculated that you achieved a 94% hit rate with your M4 carbine under extreme stress conditions. You made shots at ranges and angles that most trained snipers would consider challenging, and you adapted to changing tactical situations with a level of skill that demonstrates exceptional training and natural ability." He paused in front of her. "You're a damn good soldier, Sergeant, but you're a terrible follower of orders." Riley said nothing, just maintained her attention stance. "The board has made its decision. You will receive a formal reprimand for disobeying orders and turning off your communications equipment. This reprimand will remain in your file permanently. You will also undergo additional training on proper radio protocol and chain of command." Riley felt her heart sink. A permanent reprimand meant no promotions, no advancement, probably the end of her career. "However," the general continued, "you are also awarded the Silver Star for conspicuous gallantry in action against an enemy force. Your actions in Valley 7 demonstrated the highest standards of military valor and tactical excellence." He held out a small blue box containing the medal. "You're one of the best operators I've ever seen, Sergeant Clark. Don't make me regret not court-martialing you." "No, sir. Thank you, sir." After the board dismissed her, Major Hendricks found her in the hallway. "You got lucky, you know. If those hostages had died, or if you'd been killed, the board would have crucified you." "I know, sir, but they didn't die, and neither did I." 30 rounds, Riley. You went into a combat zone with 30 rounds and faced down 40 fighters. What were you thinking? Riley considered the question seriously. "I was thinking that sometimes you have to trust your training more than your orders. Command was telling me to wait for backup that would arrive too late. My training was telling me I had a narrow window to complete the mission. I trusted my training." "And it almost got you killed." "Yes, sir, but it also saved 2 American lives and eliminated a target who would have killed more Americans if we'd waited. I'll take that trade every time." Hendricks shook his head, but he was smiling slightly. "You're either the bravest operator in Delta Force or the craziest. Maybe both." "Maybe both," Riley agreed. 6 months later, Riley deployed again, this time with full support, adequate ammunition, and strict orders to maintain radio contact at all times. She completed 3 more high-value target missions without incident, always following proper protocol, always coordinating with command. But every operator in Delta Force knew the story of Valley 7, knew about the sergeant who'd walked into enemy territory with 1 magazine, got surrounded by 40 armed soldiers, and somehow walked out alive with the mission accomplished. Some said it was luck, some said it was skill, Some said it was a little of both. Riley knew the truth. It was training. The kind of training that taught you to stay calm when everything went wrong, to make every round count when ammunition was scarce, and to find solutions when everyone else saw only problems. She'd walked into that valley with 30 rounds, because that's all she had. She'd survived because she'd made every single one count. That's what Delta Force training really meant. Not that you'd always have the perfect equipment or the perfect situation, but that you'd know how to win anyway. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this one.